Some stories find us when we least expect them. They arrive not with fanfare, but with a quiet knock at the door, or in this case, a desperate scratching on a cold February night. This is a story about second chances, about what happens when two souls, both discarded by the world, find each other in the darkness. It's about a retired nurse who thought her useful days were behind her, and a mother dog who refused to give up on her babies even as poison coursed through her veins. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever wondered whether anyone still needs you, this story is for you. Because sometimes, the greatest purpose finds us not when we're young and strong, but when we've learned enough about life to recognize a miracle when it scratches at our door. The scratching came at 11 o'clock. Dorothy Mitchell muted the television, some antique show Frank used to love, and listened. Rain drummed against the windows. Wind howled through the eaves, and beneath it all, that sound, scratch, 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 rhythmic, deliberate, like someone writing a message in code. She pulled her cardigan tighter and walked to the front door. Her knees ached. They always ached now, at 71, especially in the cold. The February chill had teeth this year. The weatherman called it a freak cold snap. Dorothy called it Arizona, forgetting its manners. Her porch light was the only one still burning on the street. The Hendersons across the way had gone to bed hours ago. The Millers next door kept their house dark as a tomb after 9. But Dorothy always left her light on. Old habit from the night shifts, a beacon for anyone who might need it. Tonight, someone did. She opened the door. A German shepherd lay on the welcome mat, the one that said, "Bless this home," in faded letters. The dog's ribs jutted out like piano keys beneath matted gray-black fur. Her hind leg was crusted with dried blood. An old leather collar hung loose around her neck. But none of that made Dorothy drop to her knees on the cold concrete. What made her knees buckle were the 6 tiny bodies huddled beneath the dog's belly. Puppies. Newborns. Eyes still sealed shut. Ears flat against their skulls, mouths opening and closing, searching for milk that wasn't coming. Good Lord. The mother dog lifted her head. The effort seemed to cost her everything. Her whole body trembled, not just from the cold. Her muscles contracted in strange, unnatural rhythms. White foam bubbled at the corner of her mouth. Dorothy had seen those symptoms before. 30 years ago, in the emergency room, a 3-year-old boy arrived with the same tremors, the same foam, the same dilated pupils, staring at nothing and everything. Rat poison. Someone had poisoned this dog, and she had still dragged herself here past dark houses, past closed doors, until she found the one porch light still burning because her babies needed to live. Even if she didn't. The dog looked at Dorothy, then down at her puppies, then back at Dorothy. The same desperate back and forth a mother makes when she cannot protect her young alone. Dorothy understood. "Okay, Mama?" Her voice cracked. "Okay. I hear you." She slid her arms beneath the dog's body lighter than expected, all bones and desperation, and lifted. The puppies tumbled off the mat, crying in thin, reedy voices. They crawled after their mother's scent, bumping into Dorothy's shoes, into each other, into the doorframe. Dorothy carried the dog inside. The puppies followed, stumbling over the threshold into the warmth. The door closed behind them. And in the house that had been silent for 8 years, something shifted. Something began. If this story touched your heart tonight, I'd love to know where you're reading from. Drop a comment below. Sometimes the smallest connections remind us we're never truly alone. Dorothy laid the dog on the old wool blanket in the living room. Frank's blanket, the one she'd pulled from his side of the bed after the funeral and never washed. 8 years. And she still caught his scent, sometimes Old Spice and sawdust from his workshop. The dog's body seized again, legs stiffening, back arching, foam thick at her lips. Dorothy's hands moved before her mind caught up. Check the airway. Keep the head stable. Don't let her choke. 40 years at St. Joseph's. Head nurse, night shift, emergency room. She'd held dying men's hands. She'd told mothers their children wouldn't wake up. She'd worked 16-hour shifts until her feet bled into her white shoes. Then, one day, the hospital administrator, a man half her age with a diploma still wet, called her into his office. Policy, he said. Mandatory retirement at 66. Her colleagues gave her a gold-plated watch. Enjoy your golden years, Dorothy. That watch sat in her nightstand drawer. She'd never worn it once. The seizure passed. The dog, Rosie, the collar said. Though the letters were almost worn away, went limp. Her breathing came shallow and fast, too fast. The puppies cried from the doorway. Thin, mewling sounds. Hungry sounds. Dorothy glanced at the hallway. 3 bedrooms in this house. The master, where she slept alone. Karen's old room, untouched since her daughter moved to New York 15 years ago. And Frank's office. Door closed. Dust gathering on the handle. Karen called every Sunday. 7 o'clock sharp. 15 minutes exactly. Dorothy could hear the keyboard clicking in the background. The television. Someone calling Karen. Dinner's ready. Last Christmas. Karen came home for 3 days. On the second night, her phone rang during dinner. Dorothy watched her daughter walk out to the porch. Watched through the window as Karen talked and laughed for 20 minutes. The meatloaf went cold on the plate. Dorothy never mentioned it. She looked down at Rosie now, at the scars visible beneath the matted fur, long, straight lines across the back. Too deliberate for accidents. Someone had hurt this dog. Badly. For a long time. Dorothy reached for the collar tag. Tilted it toward the lamp. Henderson family, 2015 to 2023. A phone number was etched below, then tucked into a small leather pocket on the collar's inside, something she hadn't noticed before. A photograph. Dorothy pulled the photograph from the leather pocket. Laminated, worn at the edges. A German shepherd, younger, healthier, coat gleaming, sat beside an elderly man in a red flannel shirt. White hair, kind eyes. The sort of face that had laughed often and worried about others more than himself. Beside him stood a woman in her 50s. Scrubs, a caretaker or nurse. Her hand rested on the dog's head with easy affection. Dorothy flipped the photo over, handwritten in blue ink. Rosie and Dad and Rebecca, Christmas, 2022. Rosie. The dog had a name. A family. A life before this cold February night. Dorothy set the photo on the coffee table and turned back to the dying animal on her husband's blanket. The medicine cabinet. She needed the medicine cabinet. Her knees popped as she stood. The bathroom was 12 steps away. She counted them, the way she used to count steps during long shifts when exhaustion made the hallway swim. The cabinet door squeaked open. Aspirin. Tums. Expired antibiotics she kept forgetting to throw out. And there, a black bottle she'd bought last year after reading an article about food poisoning. Activated charcoal. She'd kept emergency supplies since her nursing days. Old habit. Frank used to tease her about it. You expecting a disaster, Dot? She'd smile and say, always be ready. That's what my mother taught me. Dorothy grabbed the bottle. Grabbed a plastic syringe from the drawer, the kind that came with children's cold medicine. Frank had kept them for the grandchildren he'd hoped Karen would give them someday. Back to the living room. Rosie's breathing had grown more ragged. Her tongue lolled out, pink, fading to gray. Dorothy mixed the charcoal with water in a coffee mug, stirred until it turned to black sludge, filled the syringe. "Open up, Mama. Come on now." She pried Rosie's jaw open with her left hand. The dog's teeth were yellow but strong, a working dog's teeth. The muscles beneath Dorothy's fingers had once been powerful. She squeezed the syringe. Black liquid dribbled down Rosie's throat. Most of it. Some spilled onto the blanket, staining Frank's wool with dark streaks. "That's it. Swallow. Good girl." The puppies were still crying. 6 tiny voices, sharp and desperate. Dorothy checked her watch. Midnight. She needed milk. Puppy formula would be best, but she didn't have any. The pet store wouldn't open for 9 hours. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. Dorothy opened it, scanning the shelves, eggs, leftover soup. A carton of goat milk she'd bought for making soap, a hobby she'd picked up last winter when the silence in the house grew too loud. Goat milk. Close enough to dog's milk. It would have to do. She warmed it in a saucepan, testing the temperature against her wrist the way she'd tested formula for babies in the NICU decades ago. Found a small dropper bottle, cleaned it, filled it. The first puppy, the smallest one, latched onto the dropper immediately. Its tiny paws needed the air. Dorothy adjusted the angle, slowed down. The first attempt made the puppy cough. She tried again, gentler this time. By the third puppy, she had the rhythm. 1 down, 5 to go. Dorothy fed them one by one. Her back ached from hunching over. Her eyes burned. The clock on the wall ticked past 1, past 2, every hour. She checked Rosie. Pulse beneath the jaw, rise and fall of the ribs. Gums still too pale, but not gray anymore. At 2:47 a.m., Rosie seized again. Dorothy held her steady, kept her airway clear, hummed an old hymn until the tremors passed. At 3:15 a.m., the seizures stopped completely. At 4:30 a.m., Dorothy fed the puppies again. The smallest one, she was already thinking of it as the fighter, drank more than the others. At 5:02 a.m., Rosie opened her eyes. Not the glassy, unfocused stare from before. These eyes tracked Dorothy as she moved across the room. "Hey there!" Dorothy's voice came out hoarse. "Welcome back." Rosie's tail moved. Just a twitch. Just once. At 6:15 a.m., gray light leaked through the curtains. Dorothy sat on the floor beside Rosie, her back against the couch, a cold cup of coffee forgotten beside her. Her hands trembled from exhaustion. Rosie lifted her head, looked at Dorothy, then looked at her puppies in the cardboard box Dorothy had found in the garage. The dog tried to stand. Front legs pushed. Back legs buckled. She collapsed. Tried again. Collapsed. Third time. Shaking. Straining. She stood. Dorothy didn't help. Just watched. Rosie took one trembling step toward her puppies. "Atta girl," Dorothy whispered. The photo lay on the coffee table. The old man's kind face. The woman named Rebecca. Christmas 2022. The phone number on the collar. Someone out there knew this dog. Knew her story. Knew who had hurt her. Dorothy reached for her phone. It was time to find out who had thrown Rosie away. The phone rang 4 times before someone picked up. "Hello?" A woman's voice. Young, impatient. Television noise in the background, some morning talk show. Hosts laughing about something. "Hello, my name is Dorothy Mitchell. I'm calling about a dog. A German Shepherd named Rosie. This number was on her collar." Silence. The television volume dropped. The dog. The woman's tone shifted. Flatter now. Guarded. What about her? She showed up at my house last night. In bad shape. Someone poisoned her. She has puppies, 6 of them. Newborns. I've been up all night trying to keep them alive. Dorothy waited. On the blanket across the room. Rosie had managed to drag herself closer to the cardboard box. Her nose touched the edge. One of the puppies, the fighter, climbed over its siblings toward the warmth of its mother. Look, lady. The woman exhaled sharply. We got rid of that dog months ago. My father died. We sold the house. She's not our problem anymore. And Dorothy's grip tightened on the phone. Got rid of her. She was pregnant. It's February. Someone left her out in. That was my brother's call. Or maybe my sister's. I don't know. I was in Scottsdale dealing with the estate lawyers. A door slammed somewhere on the other end. Point is, she's not ours anymore. But she's sick. She nearly died last night. If I hadn't found her. Then call animal control. The woman's voice hardened. I don't have time for this. I'm already late for a showing. A showing? I'm a realtor. Mrs. What did you say your name was, Mitchell? Papers rustled. Keys jingled. Look, Mrs. Mitchell, I'm sorry about the dog. Really? But she's been gone for 3 months. Whatever happened to her after she left? That's not on us. Dorothy looked at the photograph still lying on the coffee table. The old man in the flannel shirt, his hand on Rosie's head, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners. Your father, Dorothy said slowly. He loved this dog. The silence stretched longer this time. My father loved a lot of things. The woman's voice cracked. Just slightly, before hardening again. He's gone now. And I can't take care of his messes. I have 3 properties closing this week, and a mother-in-law who won't stop calling about the inheritance taxes and... She stopped. Breathed. Just call animal control, or keep her. I don't care. But don't call this number again. Click. Dorothy sat on the floor, phone still pressed to her ear, listening to dead air. Rosie had pulled herself into the cardboard box now. The puppies swarmed toward her, climbing over each other, mouths searching. Her milk hadn't come in yet. Her body was still fighting the poison, but she let them try anyway. Let them feel her warmth. Dorothy set the phone down. She picked up the photograph again, studied the woman in scrubs standing beside the old man. Rebecca. The handwriting said Rebecca, not a Henderson. The daughter on the phone had said my brother and my sister. But Rebecca wasn't family. Rebecca was someone else. Someone who had been there at Christmas, who had touched Rosie with obvious affection, who had smiled for the camera like she belonged. A caretaker. That's what she looked like. A hospice nurse. Maybe. Or a home health aide. Someone who had been there in the old man's final years, who had known Rosie before the abandonment, before the cold, before the poison. Dorothy slipped the photograph into her cardigan pocket. She would find Rebecca. Somehow. But not today. Today. She had 6 hungry puppies and a mother dog who needed to eat. The refrigerator yielded leftover chicken from 3 nights ago. Dorothy shredded it into small pieces, mixed it with warm water to make a thin paste. Rosie needed hydration, needed calories, needed strength to make milk. She set the bowl in front of Rosie's nose. The dog sniffed. Her tongue, still pale, lapped weakly at the mixture. That's it, Mama. That's my girl. Rosie ate. Slowly, painfully. But she ate. Dorothy's phone buzzed at 11. A text from Karen. Tried calling earlier. You okay? She stared at the message. Her daughter never texted first. Never checked in outside their scheduled Sunday calls. Dorothy typed back, Fine. Busy. Call you later. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Okay. Love you. Dorothy set the phone face down on the coffee table. Outside, the February sun had finally broken through the clouds. Pale light streamed through the curtains, falling across Rosie and her puppies. In that light, Dorothy could see things she'd missed in the darkness. The scars ran in 3 parallel lines down Rosie's back. Too straight to be from fights, too evenly spaced to be accidents. And her right ear torn at the edge, healed badly, like someone had grabbed it and pulled until the cartilage ripped. And her back left paw 2 nails missing entirely, the others grown and crooked, like she'd been caught in something and yanked herself free. Dorothy's stomach turned. The Henderson woman's voice echoed in her mind. We got rid of her. No, not just got rid of. Someone had hurt this dog long before they threw her out, and Dorothy was going to find out who. Day 3. Rosie lifted her head from the blanket and stretched her neck toward the cardboard box. Her tongue, pink again. Healthy pink reached out and touched the nearest puppy's face. Dorothy watched from the kitchen doorway, coffee cup frozen halfway to her lips. The puppy squirmed. Rosie licked again. Then again, cleaning, checking, counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All alive, all breathing, all hers. Dorothy set down the coffee and checked the feeding schedule she'd taped to the refrigerator. Every 2 hours, goat milk, dropper bottle. Rotate through all 6. Note any changes. Her handwriting looked like a nurse's chart. Old habits. Day 5. Rosie ate on her own for the first time. Shredded chicken mixed with rice. She didn't wolf it down her stomach, couldn't handle that yet, but she ate steadily, deliberately, like someone who knew she needed fuel. The puppies were getting stronger. The smallest one, the fighter, had gained weight. Dorothy could feel it when she lifted her for feeding. Less fragile, more solid. Day 7. Bath day. Dorothy filled the tub with warm water, not hot, just comfortable, and lifted Rosie in. The dog's legs splayed against the porcelain. Her body went rigid. Her breathing quickened. Easy, Mama. Easy. Just getting you clean. Dorothy worked soap through the matted fur with gentle fingers. Black water swirled down the drain. Dirt. Dried blood. The remnants of 3 months on the streets. The scars showed clearer now. 3 long lines running parallel down Rosie's back. Raised. Healed over but permanent. Too straight to be from another animal. Too evenly spaced to be accidental. Belt marks, or a cord. Dorothy had seen marks like these on children in the ER. She knew what they meant. She looked at Rosie's right ear. The tear was old months, maybe years, but the edges had never been stitched. Someone had grabbed this ear and pulled until it ripped, and the back left paw, 2 nails gone entirely. The others twisted, growing and crooked. Like the foot had been caught in something and Rosie had torn herself free rather than stay trapped. Oh, honey, Dorothy whispered. Rosie stood motionless in the water. Not fighting, not relaxing, just enduring. Dorothy finished the bath in silence. Dried Rosie with old towels. Didn't try to touch her head. That night, Dorothy couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, seeing those scars every time she closed her eyes. Day 8. The phone rang at 7:15 p.m. Sunday. Karen. Dorothy almost didn't answer. She was in the middle of a feeding ember. She'd started calling this one the troublemaker who always squirmed and bit the bottle nipple instead of sucking. She wedged the phone between her shoulder and ear. Hello, honey? Mom. Karen's voice sounded strange. You sound different. Are you okay? Dorothy looked around the living room, Rosie on the blanket, watching her. 6 puppies in various states of sleep and wakefulness. Towels everywhere. Feeding bottles drying on the counter. The whole house smelled like dog and milk and something else, something alive. I found a dog, Dorothy said. Or she found me. Showed up on my porch last week. Poisoned, pregnant, half dead. 6 puppies. Silence on the line. Mom, that's a lot. Karen. I ran the ER night shift for 20 years. I think I can handle a few puppies. A laugh. Small but real. The first genuine laugh Dorothy had heard from her daughter in months. Yeah. Karen said. Yeah. I guess you can. They talked for 45 minutes. Dorothy told her about that first night, about the charcoal and the goat milk, about learning the rhythm of the dropper bottle, about Rosie's first steps. Karen listened, really listened. No keyboard clicking, no television murmuring, just her daughter's breathing on the other end of the line. Mom, Karen said finally, you sound like yourself again. Dorothy didn't know what to say to that. Day 9. Someone knocked on the front door. Dorothy opened it to find Margaret from 2 houses down, 68 years old, widow. They'd waved at each other for 30 years, but never had a real conversation. Dorothy Mitchell. Margaret held a plastic bag in each hand. I heard you're running a dog hospital in here. Brought some old towels and kibble? My buster passed last spring. Figured someone ought to use his things. How did you... Gladys from the corner told Ruth at the pharmacy who told me at book club. Margaret shrugged. Small neighborhood. Word travels. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Day 10. Walter showed up. 73. Former carpenter. Widower. He carried a wooden box he'd built that morning lined with old flannel. Just the right size for 6 growing puppies. Nothing fancy, he said, setting it down. But it'll keep them warm. My hands needed something to do anyway. Day 11. Eleanor Ellie. She insisted appeared with a pot of chicken soup and a casserole dish of something involving noodles. You forget to eat when you're busy, she said. I know that look. Had it myself when my Harold was in hospice. She stayed for coffee, then for lunch, then for most of the afternoon, helping Dorothy clean bottles and fold towels. Dorothy sat at her kitchen table with 3 people she'd barely spoken to in 30 years. The radio played softly in the corner some oldies station Ellie had found. The smell of soup mixed with coffee and dog and something Dorothy hadn't experienced in 8 years. Company. Day 12. Dorothy fell asleep on the couch. She hadn't meant to. She'd sat down to rest her eyes for just a minute after the 3 a.m. feeding. And then she woke to warmth against her feet. Rosie. The dog had left her spot by the puppies, had crossed the room, had chosen to lie at Dorothy's feet. Her body pressed against Dorothy's legs. Dorothy didn't move. Didn't breathe, afraid any shift would send Rosie back to her corner. But Rosie just sighed a deep, releasing sound and closed her eyes. For the first time since Dorothy found her, the dog slept without curling protectively around her babies. She slept stretched out, relaxed, trusting someone else to keep watch. Day 14. Rosie's milk came in. Dorothy checked that morning during the regular feeding routine, and there it was, thin at first, barely enough, but real. The puppies latched on properly for the first time, their tiny tails wiggling. There you go, Mama, Dorothy said. There you go. She called Margaret and Walter and Ellie. They came over that afternoon with coffee and donuts from the shop on Camelback Road. They sat in the living room watching the puppies nurse. 6 small bodies pressed against their mother's belly. "They need names," Margaret said. Dorothy looked at the smallest one, the fighter. The one who'd almost died that first night. "Hope," she said. "That one's Hope." Walter pointed to the puppy pressed closest to Rosie's side. The clingy one, Faith. They named them all Hope. Faith, Grace, Ember, Solace, Haven. Ellie raised her coffee cup. "To the pups. To the pups." Everyone echoed. Dorothy looked around her living room. 4 people. 7 dogs. The radio playing softly. Afternoon light streaming through windows she'd finally cleaned. The doorbell rang. Margaret stood to answer it. Dorothy heard voices in the hallway. Margaret's, surprised and cautious, and another voice, male, unfamiliar, smooth in a way that made Dorothy's shoulders tighten. "Mrs. Mitchell," Margaret called. "There's someone here to see you." Dorothy walked to the front door. A man stood on her porch, mid-40s, gray vest over a pressed white shirt, expensive watch catching the light, leather shoes polished to a mirror shine. He looked at the neighborhood, the modest houses, the older cars, the patchy lawns with the expression of someone who had stepped in something unpleasant. "Mrs. Mitchell." He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "I'm Bradley Henderson. I believe you have my dog." Dorothy did not step aside. "Your dog." She kept her voice level. 40 years of dealing with hostile patients, grieving families, and arrogant doctors had taught her how to stay calm when everything inside her screamed otherwise. "The Henderson family told me they got rid of her months ago." Bradley's smile flickered. Just for a second. Then it was back. Wider this time. "A misunderstanding. My sister acted hastily after our father passed. I was out of the country business in Singapore, and by the time I returned, well," he spread his hands, palms up. "You know how families can be. I know your sister said Rosie wasn't your problem anymore. My sister says a lot of things." Bradley glanced past Dorothy into the house. His eyes found Rosie on the blanket, the puppies in Walter's wooden box. "Look, Mrs. Mitchell, I don't want any trouble. That dog belonged to my father for 8 years. Sentimental value. You understand." Behind Dorothy, Margaret shifted her weight. Her voice came low, meant only for Dorothy's ears. "The Henderson estate was in the paper last month. Old man Henderson left millions. Bet there's something about the dog in that will." Dorothy didn't turn around. She kept her eyes on Bradley Henderson. 40 years of reading people, the ones who told the truth, the ones who lied, the ones who lied so well they believed their own stories. Bradley Henderson was the third kind. "Sentimental value," Dorothy repeated. "That's why you're here 2 weeks after I found her poisoned on my porch." The smile slipped. Longer this time. "Poisoned. I don't know anything about that. Someone tried to kill her. Mr. Henderson. She showed up at my door with rat poison in her system. 6 newborn puppies, and scars all over her body." Dorothy stepped forward. "Not much. Just enough to make him step back. Belt marks on her back, a torn ear, missing nails on her back paw. Someone hurt that dog. Hurt her badly. For a long time." Bradley's jaw tightened. His eyes went flat. "I don't know what you're implying, Mrs. Mitchell. I'm not implying anything. I'm telling you what I saw, what I treated, what I kept alive while your family was dealing with estates and business trips." That dog is Henderson property. Legally. She belongs to us. Property. Dorothy let the word hang in the air. She's not a couch. Mr. Henderson. According to Arizona law, she's exactly that. Bradley's voice dropped. The friendly act was gone now. This was the real man underneath, cold, smooth, accustomed to getting what he wanted. I can make this difficult. Lawyers. Police. A theft charge. Maybe. Or you can hand her over now, and we forget this conversation ever happened. From the living room, Rosie lifted her head. She was looking at the door, at Bradley. Her ears flattened against her skull. Her body pressed lower against the blanket, making herself small. She recognized him, and she was afraid. Dorothy saw it. The way Rosie's muscles tensed. The way her eyes tracked Bradley's every movement. The way she positioned herself between the door and the box where her puppies slept. Mr. Henderson. Dorothy's voice was quiet now. Quiet and hard. I think you should leave. I'll be back. Bradley straightened his vest, adjusted his watch. With paperwork, and then we'll see how confident you feel. He turned and walked to his car. A black Lexus, parked at the curb, engine still running. He didn't look back. Dorothy watched until the car disappeared around the corner. That fella looked like trouble. Walter had appeared on the porch of his house next door, coffee cup in hand, face unreadable. That fella is trouble. Dorothy closed the door, locked it, leaned against the wood. Her hands were shaking. Margaret and Ellie stood in the living room, silent. Walter's wooden box sat between them. 6 puppies sleeping inside. Rosie hadn't moved from her defensive position. Dorothy. Margaret's voice was gentle. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. That night. Dorothy couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the house. The refrigerator humming, the clock ticking in the hallway. Rosie's breathing from the living room, slow and steady. At 2 a.m, a sound made her sit up. Not footsteps. Paws. Soft pads on hardwood. Dorothy turned on the bedside lamp. Rosie stood in the doorway. Her eyes caught the light, glowing amber in the darkness. She didn't come closer, just stood there, watching. Hey, girl. Dorothy kept her voice soft. What's wrong? Rosie walked to the side of the bed. Slowly, deliberately. She lay down on the floor, her body pressed against the bed frame, her head resting on her paws. Guarding. She had heard the threat in Bradley's voice, understood it somehow, and now she was standing watch. Dorothy reached down, hesitated, then touched Rosie's head. The dog didn't flinch. I won't let him take you, Dorothy whispered. I promise. The words tasted wrong in her mouth. She hated promises. The last promise she'd made was to Frank. I'll be here when you wake up, and she'd fallen asleep in the chair beside his hospital bed, exhausted. And when she opened her eyes, he was already cold. She'd broken that promise. What made her think she could keep this one morning came gray and cold. Dorothy made coffee, fed the puppies, let Rosie out into the backyard, watched her walk stiffly across the dead February grass, sniffing the fence line, marking her territory. At 8 o'clock, she called Karen. Mom. Karen's voice was groggy. East Coast time, 3 hours ahead. It's barely 5 here. What's wrong? Dorothy told her everything. Bradley. The threats. The will Margaret had mentioned. the fear in Rosie's eyes. Silence on the line. "Mom, I'm a corporate lawyer. This isn't really my area." Karen paused. "But I know people. Let me make some calls." "You don't have to." "Mom." Karen's voice sharpened. "You drove 8 hours when I had mono freshman year. You paid for law school without telling Dad because you knew he'd worry about the money. You sat with me on the phone for 6 hours when David left." Dorothy's throat tightened. "Let me do this," Karen said. "Please." "Okay, honey." Dorothy's voice cracked. "Okay." She hung up, shut the phone on the counter, looked out the window at Rosie in the backyard, standing in a patch of weak sunlight, her breath misting in the cold air. The photograph was still in her cardigan pocket. Dorothy pulled it out, looked at it again. Rosie, the old man in the flannel shirt, the woman in scrubs, Rebecca. The Henderson daughter had said she didn't know anything about the poisoning. Bradley wanted the dog back for sentimental value, but something didn't add up. The will, the timing, the way Bradley's face had changed when Dorothy mentioned the scars. What was Rosie worth to them? And where was Rebecca, the woman who had been there at Christmas, who had cared for the old man in his final years, who had touched Rosie with obvious affection? Dorothy looked at the photo again, at the handwriting on the back. Rosie and Dad and Rebecca, Christmas 2022. Rebecca knew something. Dorothy pulled out her phone, opened the browser, typed, "Arthur Henderson, Phoenix, Arizona obituary." The results loaded. Arthur James Henderson, 82, passed away November 15, 2023, survived by his children Bradley, Melissa, and Patricia. Services held at Valley Memorial, in lieu of flowers, donations to the Arizona Humane Society. Dorothy scrolled down, read the comments, the memories, the names of people who had known him. And there, near the bottom, a comment from 3 months ago. "Mr. Henderson was the kindest man I ever cared for. I miss him every day. Rebecca Thornton, Scottsdale." Dorothy stared at the screen. Rebecca Thornton, Scottsdale. She had a name, she had a city. Now she just had to find her before Bradley Henderson came back with his lawyers. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. Dorothy saw the mail truck stop, saw the carrier, a woman she'd waved to for 15 years, walk up the path with something that required a signature. "Dorothy Mitchell, that's me. Sign here, please." The carrier's face was blank, professional. She didn't meet Dorothy's eyes as she handed over the envelope. "Maricopa County Superior Court." Dorothy signed. The carrier left. The envelope felt heavy in her hands. She opened it, standing in the doorway. Henderson versus Mitchell. Complaint for recovery of property. The words blurred. She blinked. Read them again. Plaintiff seeks return of one German Shepherd dog, known as Rosie, unlawfully retained by defendant. Plaintiff further seeks damages for loss of property value and legal fees. Property. Rosie was property. Like a lamp, like a chair. Defendant must respond within 14 days, or judgment will be entered by default. 14 days. Dorothy's hands shook. The paper rattled. She walked inside, closed the door, leaned against it. Rosie looked up from her blanket. The puppies nursed at her belly, their small tails wagging. 6 healthy lives Dorothy had fought to save. None of it mattered to the law. 3 days later, Harold Green knocked on her door. He wore a polo shirt with the HOA logo embroidered on the chest. Khaki pants pressed sharp, a clipboard in his hands, pen clipped to the top. "Dorothy." He didn't smile. "We need to talk." "Harold." I've received complaints, multiple dogs, noise at all hours, unusual foot traffic. He glanced at his clipboard. The bylaws are clear. 1 pet per household. You have 7. They're puppies. Harold, I'm fostering them until they're old enough to be adopted. That's not what the bylaws say. Dorothy looked at this man, Harold Green, 3 houses down. They'd lived on the same street for 30 years. He'd attended Frank's funeral. He'd brought a casserole that sat untouched in her refrigerator until it grew mold. I've lived here longer than you have, she said. Doesn't matter. Harold made a note on his clipboard. Rules are rules. You have 2 weeks to comply. After that, there will be fines, daily fines. 2 weeks, 2 weeks. He turned and walked back to his house without saying goodbye. Dorothy closed the door, pressed her forehead against the wood. The phone rang that night. Karen. Mom, I talked to my contacts. Her daughter's voice was careful, the voice she used when delivering bad news. Arizona law treats dogs as property. If Henderson can prove ownership registration, vet records, anything, he has legal standing. But he threw her out. He abandoned her. Can you prove that? Do you have witnesses? Documentation? Dorothy thought of the scars, the torn ear, the missing nails. I have evidence of abuse. That's different from abandonment, Mom. And unless you can tie it directly to Bradley Henderson, not his father, not his sisters, but him specifically, it won't help in a property dispute. Silence. I'm still working on it, Karen said. There might be something in the will. But Mom, the law isn't about what's right. It's about what you can prove. I know. Honey. Don't give up. Please. Dorothy closed her eyes. I won't. But the words felt hollow. That night, Dorothy sat in the dark living room, 3 a.m, the house silent except for the tick of the hallway clock. Rosie lay at her feet, guarding, always guarding. Maybe I'm just a foolish old woman, Dorothy said aloud. Her voice sounded thin in the darkness. Old. 71 years old. No money for lawyers. No power. No connections. She stared at the ceiling. Who am I to fight a man like that? Rosie lifted her head, looked at her. I couldn't save Frank. The words came out before she could stop them. Words she'd never said to anyone. I promised him I'd be there when he woke up, and I fell asleep. I fell asleep in that stupid chair, and when I opened my eyes, he was already cold. Tears ran down her cheeks. I couldn't save him. Maybe I can't save you either. Morning came. Dorothy loaded Rosie into the back seat of her car, put the puppies in Walter's wooden box, buckled her seatbelt. She drove to Maricopa County Animal Shelter. The building was beige stucco, chain-link fencing around the back, a sign by the entrance. Adoption Center open 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Dorothy parked, turned off the engine, sat. Through the rearview mirror, she could see Rosie watching her, silent, still. Those amber eyes fixed on Dorothy's face. This is for the best, Dorothy said. Her voice didn't sound convincing even to herself. They'll find you a good home, someone younger, someone with money for lawyers. Rosie didn't move. Dorothy opened her door, stepped out. The February air was cold. Her breath misted. She walked toward the shelter entrance. Each step felt like wading through concrete. 10 feet from the door, she could see through the glass. A reception desk, fluorescent lights, a woman in scrubs holding a clipboard. 5 feet. She stopped. Through the window, she could see a hallway leading to the back. Kennels, cages, dogs behind chain link, some barking, some silent, some staring at nothing. A sign by the desk, average length of stay 30 days, German Shepherds 45 to 60 days. And below that, smaller print, animals not adopted within 90 days may be transferred to partner facilities. Transferred. Dorothy knew what that meant. She turned around, walked back to the car, opened the door. Rosie was still watching her, still silent, still trusting. That trust, that complete, unearned trust. Dorothy had almost betrayed it. She slid into the driver's seat, closed the door, put her hands on the steering wheel. Her shoulders shook. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Tears not the quiet kind from last night, but ugly. Messy sobs tore out of her throat. She cried for Frank, for the promise she'd broken, for the 5 years of silence and loneliness and feeling like a discarded appliance. She cried for Rosie, for the scars on her back and the torn ear and the puppies she'd almost condemned to cages. She cried for herself. 71 years old, sitting in a shelter parking lot, weeping like a child because she'd almost given up, because she'd almost let them win. A wet nose touched her ear. Dorothy turned. Rosie had pushed her head through the gap between the front seats. Her tongue licked the tears from Dorothy's cheek. "I'm sorry," Dorothy whispered. "I'm so sorry. I almost—" She couldn't finish. Rosie licked her again. Dorothy wiped her face with the back of her hand, took a breath, then another. "Okay." Her voice was raw, cracked, but something had shifted. "Okay, we fight." She started the car, pulled out of the parking lot. In the rearview mirror, the shelter grew smaller. Smaller. Gone. Dorothy drove home. Someone was waiting on her porch. A woman sat on Dorothy's porch steps, mid-50s, gray-streaked hair pulled back in a loose bun, denim jacket faded at the elbows, sneakers worn at the heels. She stood when Dorothy's car pulled into the driveway. Dorothy recognized her. The photograph. Christmas 2022. The woman in scrubs standing beside the old man and Rosie. Rebecca. Dorothy got out of the car slowly. Her eyes were still red. Her hands still trembled. "Mrs. Mitchell." The woman's voice was hesitant. "I'm Rebecca Thornton. I was Mr. Henderson's caretaker, Arthur Henderson. The last 3 years of his life. I know who you are." Dorothy opened the back door. Rosie jumped out, landing stiffly on the driveway. "I found your photograph in her collar." Rebecca's eyes went to Rosie. Her face crumpled. "Oh, girl." She dropped to her knees on the concrete. "Oh, sweet girl." Rosie stood still for a moment. Her nose twitched. Then she walked forward slowly, cautiously, and pressed her head against Rebecca's chest. Rebecca wrapped her arms around the dog and cried. Dorothy watched, said nothing. Let them have this moment. When Rebecca finally stood, her eyes were swollen. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "Can I come in? There's something you need to know." They sat in Dorothy's kitchen, coffee cooling in their cups, the puppies sleeping in Walter's box, Rosie lying on the floor between them, her head resting on Rebecca's foot. "Arthur loved that dog," Rebecca said. "More than his own children, if I'm being honest. She slept in his room every night. When the cancer got bad, Rosie would lie beside him for hours, just breathing with him. Dorothy nodded, waited. He knew what his kids were like, Bradley especially, always calculating. Rebecca's hands tightened around her coffee cup. So Arthur put it in his will, a condition. Rosie had to be cared for until the end of her natural life. If the family failed to do that, if they abandoned her, a third of the estate would go to an animal rescue organization instead. How much is a third? About $2 million. Dorothy's breath caught. Bradley found out after the funeral. He was furious. Tried to get the will changed. But Arthur had used a different lawyer, one his kids didn't control. Rebecca shook her head. So they hid it. Told the estate lawyer the original document was lost. Filed a copy that didn't include the condition about Rosie. And then they threw her out. Melissa did it. Right after the funeral. Said she was releasing her. Rebecca's voice turned bitter. Like she was a goldfish. Why didn't you say something? Rebecca looked down at her coffee. Bradley threatened me. Said he'd sue if I talked. Said he'd make sure I never worked as a caretaker again. She swallowed. I'm 53, Mrs. Mitchell. No savings. No family. This job is all I have. So you stayed quiet. I told myself it wasn't my business. That Rosie would be fine. Rebecca's voice broke. I told myself a lot of things. Silence. What changed? Rebecca looked up. I saw you on the news. An old woman fighting to keep a dog everyone else threw away. They interviewed your neighbors. She shook her head. I thought if she can do it, if she can stand up to Bradley Henderson with nothing but stubbornness. Shoot. So can I. She reached into her jacket pocket, pulled out a manila envelope. The original will. Arthur gave me a copy before he died. Made me promise to keep it safe. Dorothy picked up the envelope, opened it, read the first page. I, Arthur James Henderson, being of sound mind. 2 months later. The courtroom was smaller than Dorothy expected. No jury box, no gallery of spectators. Just a judge's bench, 2 tables, and a handful of chairs against the wall. Dorothy sat at the defendant's table. Karen sat behind her, having flown in the night before on the red eye, dark circles under her eyes. Margaret, Walter, and Ellie filled the remaining seats. Bradley Henderson sat at the plaintiff's table with 2 lawyers in matching gray suits. His face was calm, confident. Rosie lay at Dorothy's feet. The judge had allowed it material evidence. The animal rights lawyer Karen had found called her. Rebecca took the witness stand. She told the story. The will, the condition, the hidden document. Bradley's threats. Bradley's lawyers objected. The judge overruled. Rebecca produced the original will. Notarized. Dated. Signed by Arthur Henderson 6 months before his death. Bradley's face changed. The confidence cracked. His jaw tightened. Mr. Henderson. The judge, a woman with silver hair and reading glasses, looked at him over the rims. It appears you misrepresented facts to this court. Bradley stood. That woman is lying. She's just a caretaker. The gavel came down. Sharp. Final. Sit down, Mr. Henderson. One more outburst and you'll be held in contempt. Bradley sat. His face had gone white. The judge read her ruling. Based on the evidence presented, including the original will of Arthur Henderson and the testimony of Rebecca Thornton, this court finds that the plaintiff failed to fulfill the conditions of inheritance regarding the animal known as Rosie. The plaintiff has no legal standing to claim ownership. She looked at Dorothy. Mrs. Mitchell, The dog stays with you. At Dorothy's feet, Rosie lifted her head. Her tail moved, slowly at first, then faster. Karen reached over the barrier and squeezed Dorothy's shoulder. You did it. Mom? Dorothy shook her head. Her throat was too tight to speak. She looked down at Rosie, at the dog who had crawled onto her porch on the worst night of her life, who had trusted a stranger with her babies, who had stood guard by Dorothy's bed even when she had nothing left to give. No. Dorothy finally managed. We did it. The judge added one more note to her ruling. The court is also referring the matter of the concealed will to the district attorney's office for investigation into possible fraud charges. Bradley Henderson's lawyers began talking rapidly in his ear. Dorothy didn't watch. She had better things to do. 3 months later, Dorothy stood at her kitchen counter, measuring coffee grounds into the percolator. Sunday morning, 8 o'clock. Sunlight streamed through the window above the sink, warming her hands. The doorbell rang. She didn't hurry. She knew who it was. Margaret came in first, carrying a tin of homemade cookies. Walter followed with a box of donuts from the shop on Camelback Road. Ellie brought the Sunday paper. Though nobody ever read it, they just liked having it on the table. Coffee's almost ready, Dorothy said. Bless you. Walter settled into his usual chair. Ember kept me up half the night. That dog has more energy than I've had in 20 years. You love it, Margaret said. I do. Don't tell her that. Ember, the troublemaker, the one who'd always bitten the bottle nipple, had gone home with Walter 2 months ago. He'd built her a bed out of reclaimed oak, installed a dog door in his back entrance, started walking 3 miles every morning because Ember demanded it. He looked healthier than Dorothy had ever seen him. Hope, faith, and Grace had found homes in the neighborhood. The Martinez family 3 streets over had taken Hope. Faith went to a retired teacher named Barbara, who'd lost her husband the same year Dorothy lost Frank. Grace lived with a young couple expecting their first baby. Solace, the quiet one who'd always sat alone, had gone home with Rebecca. We understand each other, Rebecca had said when she came to pick her up. Sometimes the quiet ones need quiet people. Rebecca stopped by every few weeks now. She'd found a new job caring for an elderly woman in Scottsdale. Good pay. Kind employer. A fresh start. Haven stayed. The biggest puppy. The protector. The one who'd always positioned herself between her siblings and any threat. She lay now in the living room doorway, watching the kitchen. Rosie lay beside her, mother and daughter, guardians both. The coffee finished brewing. Dorothy poured 4 cups, set them on the table, sat down. Karen called last night, she said. Oh. Margaret raised an eyebrow. She's coming for Easter. Not just Christmas this year. Nobody made a fuss. That wasn't their way. But Ellie smiled into her coffee. Walter nodded slowly. That's good, Margaret said. That's real good. The conversation drifted. Walter's bad knee, the new family on the corner, the weather finally warming up. Harold Green walked past the window, saw them all sitting there. His step faltered. Neighborhood meeting, Walter called through the glass. Harold muttered something and kept walking. Everyone laughed. At noon, they left. Hugs at the door. Promises to see each other next Sunday. Dorothy stood on the porch and watched them go. Walter with his careful walk. Margaret waving from her driveway. Ellie calling something about bingo on Tuesday. The street was quiet after they left, but not empty. Not the way it used to feel. Dorothy went back inside, washed the coffee cups, dried them, put them away. Her phone buzzed. A text from Karen. Flight confirmed for April 18th. Can't wait to see you. And Rosie, love you. Dorothy typed back, love you too. Honey? She walked into the living room. Rosie lay on a blue blanket new, bought specifically for dogs who like to sleep in patches of afternoon sun. Frank's old blanket had finally been washed and put away, given permission to be just a blanket again. Haven lay beside her mother. Her tail thumped against the floor when Dorothy approached. Hey, girls. Dorothy sat down on the couch. Her knees ached. They always ached now. She didn't mind. Rosie stood, walked over, jumped up onto the couch and lay down beside Dorothy. Nodded her feet. Beside her. Haven followed, curled up on Dorothy's other side. Dorothy looked around the room. The photographs on the mantel, Frank, Karen, the puppies as newborns, Walter's wooden box in the corner, unused now but too precious to discard, the collar hanging by the door, the one that said, Henderson family, kept because it was part of Rosie's story. Outside, February had given way to March, and March to April. The trees had started to bloom. The grass had turned green again. In the hallway, the clock ticked. Dorothy could hear it now faintly, beneath Rosie's breathing, beneath Haven's sighs, beneath the distant sounds of the neighborhood coming alive. But the ticking didn't bother her anymore. It wasn't measuring empty time. It was keeping rhythm with a house full of life. Rosie's head rested on Dorothy's lap. Her eyes closed. Her breathing slowed. Dorothy stroked the fur along Rosie's back. Her fingers traced the old scars still there, still raised, but softer now, healing. You know what, girl? Dorothy said quietly. Rosie's ear twitched. They said retirement was the end. Golden years, they called it. Dorothy smiled. But you showed up on the worst night of your life. You found my porch. And somehow... She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Haven shifted, pressing closer against Dorothy's side. The afternoon light moved slowly across the floor. The radio played softly in the kitchen some oldies station Ellie had found weeks ago. Dorothy closed her eyes. Not to sleep, just to rest. She had earned it. If you've stayed until now, you've walked through something quiet and heavy. The kind of story that doesn't leave quickly. It settles somewhere behind the ribs, in a place we don't often visit. Many of us know what it feels like to be set aside, to wonder if our useful days have passed, to sit in a house that's grown too quiet and ask ourselves if anyone still needs what we have to give. And perhaps some of us know the other side too, the unexpected knock, the small life that arrives when we least expect it, asking nothing but presence, asking only that we stay. This story doesn't need to mean anything. It doesn't need to teach or resolve. It's allowed to simply rest, the way Rosie rested at Dorothy's feet, the way Dorothy rested on that couch with two dogs pressed against her sides. Some things don't need answers. They just need witnesses. If something in this story felt familiar, that's enough. You don't have to do anything with it. You can just let it be. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening all the way through.